Welcome back to Hey Kentucky here in Washington. Now, last week I got to sit down with Ashley Judd and talk about her recent decision to come forward with the sexual harassment allegations against Harvey Weinstein. At the time, we were told we had to hold the interview until today, and we found out why this morning, because she was named Time Magazine Person of the Year. We didn't talk about that because we didn't know, but now we can show you the interview, and here's what she had to say. We are happy to be joined with one of Kentucky's most famous citizens, Ashley Judd. Ashley, how are you?
I'm very well, Matt.
It is great to see you after quite some time with your UK gear on.
Always.
Yes. Well, I want to talk to you. First of all, you were in town for a speech here in Lexington, and you've really been in the news in recent month or so in a way that you probably never foresaw. But the change that has developed based on your initial coming out about the Harvey Weinstein story. Did you foresee that society would sort of change like it seems to have in the last month?
Well, it's such a good question, Matt, and I think that the answer is both yes and no. I had a feeling that, well, I had a lot of peace about my decision. And first of all, I've been telling that story since the moment it happened. My dad was with me in 1997 when I emerged from the hotel room, and the word that he uses is devastated. He could tell that I had just had a devastating experience. And so I told my dad, and I told my agent, and I told the folks with whom I was on set that night on Kiss the Girls. I told Variety the story in 2015 in even greater detail than is included in the New York Times piece.
And they didn't go with it, right?
No, they printed it, all first person. So instead of it being a written story, they actually just used the transcript of my exact words, and they printed it. And yet this was the moment when I was heard, and the Me Too movement was born. So when I was making my decision to be a named source in the New York Times, because the difference between Variety and the New York Times pieces was that Harvey wasn't specifically named in Variety, even though everyone knew about whom I was speaking, and he was being named in the comment section of the article. But obviously the New York Times piece was a really profound and excellent example of investigative journalism. And in choosing to be the only named source, I had so much serenity about it. And it had been a very prayerful decision, and I went on a run on Peach Holler Road, which is my favorite road on which to run. And I think that because of the sense of peace that I had about it, it was a bit of prescience that something incredibly significant was about to shift in our culture.
And why do you think that, I mean, I've thought to myself, why this moment? I mean, do you think society was ready? Do you think that it being someone of Harvey Weinstein's stature, do you think it was that people knew who you were? I mean, or is it a combination? Why this moment that it seems to have now led to so much after?
I think it's all of those things, Matt, and the fact that the vast majority of girls and women experience sexual misconduct. It might range from minor aggressions to outright assault and rape, but I think that we all experience it in some way, shape, and form. And that's why it's such a big deal, because this has allowed everyone to come forward and say, literally, as we know, me too. And the statistics are that 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 of us experience harassment and assault. But when I get together in groups of women, when there are 3 or 4 of us, all of us have experienced it. And so there is this collective gasp of, this is finally our moment to be heard and seen and believed.
Have you had, and I'm guessing the answer to this is yes, but have you had numbers of women reach out to you and say, you know, you have led me to be able to speak out?
Yes, I have.
And what is that? That has to be a powerful feeling, isn't it?
It is powerful, and I think that there's a power greater than myself that's in charge of all of this. And so I'm constantly reminding myself that it's a really prayerful exercise. And, you know, I can't transmit what I don't have. And I'm a firm believer that trauma that isn't transformed is trauma transferred. And so I have to continually do my own work and make sure that I'm spiritually fit and I mean, it's a joy and a pleasure, and as you know, because you referred a friend of yours to me. I mean, I just pick up the phone and I take texts and I mentor people and talk with them and reason things out, and it's been so wonderful.
And I think that's worth noting, and I'm going to say this because she won't, but I had a friend who was inspired by what you did and who said to me, just sort of, and I said, well, would you like to talk to her? And you just picked up the phone to a stranger and had that conversation with her. And I'm very, it's fascinating to me that you are willing to do that, but I also think it says a lot about you that you feel the desire to help people you don't even know.
All hearts beat the same under the skin, and we've had common experiences and we share a common solution. And I only think there's one of us here. This idea that we're strangers is kind of an unnecessary bifurcation, and I think it leads to so much of the polarization in our society. And it's absolutely my pleasure to do. And I've had a lot of women pick up the phone for me. That has been modeled for me, whether it's Gloria Steinem and talking with her before I did the Diane Sawyer piece. We were on FaceTime for an hour and a half. And I learned some things from her in that conversation. Most of what we discussed I was already familiar with, but what I really learned was, or was reminded of, is that we women need these strong female-to-female alliances, and we need to be here for each other.
Let me ask you a question that I've tried to deal with personally since all this has happened. And how do you sort of balance people that maybe in life we have respected? So I'll just use for me personally. I had a lot of respect for Charlie Rose, and I had a lot of respect for Al Franken. And I've looked back at the Bill Clinton allegations differently in the last month. And I know some of those people maybe you have had respect for. How do you look at those people in general now? People that maybe have done lots of really positive things, but then also have this in their background. How do you think people should look at that?
So good people do bad things, and bad people do good things. There's a little bit of good in the worst of us, and there's a little bit of the reverse of that. I think that it's important to remember that it's not about sex, that it's about power, and that our society and culture teaches that men have an entitlement to girls' and women's bodies, and that there is a chronic objectification of girls and women. And so that facilitates otherwise good, decent, productive men who are contributing to society in doing things that are inappropriate with girls and women. It's coming out that the folks at NBC and his colleagues all knew about Matt Lauer's behavior. There were huge systems of enabling going on. And I thought that I admired Charlie Rose until I had a personal experience with him.
Similar to what we've heard?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And then I also attended the Charlie Rose Weekend, which is a think tank convening that he organizes every summer in Aspen. And it's super highfalutin, and they get all these great thinkers in there, and the Saudi foreign minister and the former president of Mexico and blah, blah, blah. And when I went summer before last, there were quite a few panels, I would say 12 panels, and there were only 2 female participants on all of those panels. And there were no shortage of qualified women to be on those panels, I know, because I helped provide the names, because I noticed that there weren't female participants. And then somehow or another, my invitation to the next Charlie Rose Weekend got lost in the mail.
We will show you more of this interview on Monday when we return from New York City. Now, when we come back, state workers took off work and got an extra vacation day to go vote, and then they didn't do it. What should happen to them? We'll debate it next here on Hey Kentucky.